Okay, back to history. We good? There's a lot of downvoting going on today. A lot of downvoting. Again, it's just one guy's opinion, right? I've always thought that was strange. I always thought, that, yeah, it's strange. But I see it on Watch Mojo too, where they get some top 10 lists that just downvoted like crazy. There's one that I agreed with last week that I was like, you guys are off your rockers. Let's talk about the 86-87 season, shall we? Shall we all get back on the same wavelength and discuss how this works? Um, and this is quite the season. Things are kind of crazy this year. Hextall. I blame it on Ron Hextall. He is the talk of the league, and they actually talk in this in the NHL annual I have. He's not only on the cover, but he's kind of the star of the whole thing, and they talk about how great he is and all that other wonderful stuff. But I would be remiss if I didn't let you guys know about this little incident. Let's see if it. I'm gonna go back. All right. So you might miss it. Right about there. For anybody who missed it, it's kind of subtle. It's kind of right about there. Um, he decided to see whether or not. Let me just go ahead and shut that down. Close you. Close you. Um. So yeah. After that slash, he's kind of a villain going into Edmonton, and I had to show the slash because, holy crap! What so the vicious Nilsson slash is big, but he's kind of that is what happens, and I think with Hextall, the thing that really threw us off back in that day was you didn't know when it was coming. There was no real warning. There was the one year he tried to decapitate Chris Chelios. And Chelios dove just in time to avoid getting his head knocked off. Uh, Hextall beloved by many, and you could also say that him playing with a Flyers jersey on, that's kind of perfect. That's kind of where he belongs. So they make it to the finals, and he ends up winning the Conn Smythe as the MVP, even though they lose in the Stanley Cup Finals. Phil Esposito hates the name Trader Phil, doesn't like dealing Phil either, and yet he makes 17 trades in 11 months. I've got a year up here, but it's 11 months. He made 17 deals, including one that's the weirdest trade, I think, in NHL history. So again, this is where hockey is just insane. 4 years in a row, Boston gets eliminated by the Habs. You can set your watch by it. And it was a sweep as well. So you can kind of go, oh, it's Boston and Montreal. And home you go, Boston. Montreal fans wonder why I'm anti Montreal. You know how sick I was of that by that point? Because now remember, this is where Cam Neely's come over, and Neely's showing himself to be a real star in the league out of Vancouver. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to cheer for Boston this year. I'm fully on their, yeah, no, they're done. They're done. And it doesn't matter how good they were during the regular season. They're figuring it out that they need to just take their foot off the gas during the regular season and plan for the playoffs. They're getting there. Buffalo, they're out of the playoffs, and Scotty Bowman's done. So that ends it for Scotty Bowman, and they end up drafting number 1 overall, and that's Pierre Turgeon. And right out of the gate, and I see this looking back at that annual, there's a lot of pressure on Turgeon to be a mega star. Like, he is meant to be a huge, he is, they mention him and Perreault. They say Perreault was a Frenchman that helped this team as soon as they're into the league, and now another French-speaking player comes in, Turgeon, and it's sort of like it's going to happen, and oh man, comparing Turgeon to Perreault. Turgeon was a good player, but Gilbert Perreault, yeah, it's not fair. Chicago Blackhawks, they get swept. And Murray Bannerman, who outplayed Tony Esposito and took Esposito's job, Bannerman started to drop in his performance. So Bill Wirtz, being Bill Wirtz, some wheeling and dealing goes on at his behest, and Jimmy Waite is drafted, and they tag him as the goalie of the future. I've discussed this before. Don't do that. Don't call him a goalie of the future. It's doomed. It's doomed as soon as you say goalie of the future. In Detroit, Jacques Demers proves to be worth every cent that Detroit's paying for him. He leads them to a 38-point improvement. They end up in the third round, and their goals against go from 415 to 274. That's a massive improvement. So while the offense is still not exactly where they'd like it to be, defensively, in that day and age, 274 goals against is good. Now we'd look at that and go, oh, they allowed 274 goals. What a porous defense. But yeah, the Detroit Red Wings get much better. They go to the semifinals, and Edmonton takes care of them. The Whalers, these guys, they win the division, but they're unable to win in the playoffs. And in the Adams division, since they went to the divisional playoffs in 81-82, no division winner has got out of the division other than Boston in 82-83. So it's starting to be referred as like the Adams division jinx. Can't get out of the division if you win it, if you're in the Adams. So the Whalers succumb to that. But they're confident going forward that they're really good. Ray Ferraro is building himself up. He's got 27 goals that year for Hartford, and the future looks bright. The North Stars, they back out of the playoffs. I often get told I'm way too cynical as a Stars fan. The North Stars backed out of the playoffs. They had 7 points in the last 17 games of the year. All they had to do was play mediocre, and they would have made it. It was a mediocre division, and they couldn't qualify for the playoffs in the mediocre division. And then they bring in Herb Brooks to coach him. Herb Brooks, of course, known as the coach of the 1980 Olympic team in American lore. And he never really had that success at the NHL level as a coach. Gosh darn it, Minnesota was going to give it a shot. It does not end up giving Minnesota what they want. But at this point, the North Stars, future champions, contenders, that's gone. Now they're just not even a playoff team. Montreal, they lose in the semifinals, so they make it to the third round. And yet, if you read the headlines at that time, and if you read the Hockey News write-up on it, they didn't have a very good year. This is the pressure that you're under if you're Montreal in the 80s. You're being compared to those teams in the 70s. So when your season's not, they weren't first? That's all that people care about. Didn't win the Stanley Cup? That's what people care about. So the other interesting thing is that Patrick Waugh, by the time we get to that series against Philadelphia, which, as I remember, it was, shall we say, bitter, Hayward ends up being the starter in 5 out of 6 games in that series. I believe it's 5 out of 6. Brian Hayward actually kind of supplants Waugh. That, of course, doesn't last. But it shows that Patrick Waugh coming off of that rookie season and the Conn Smythe and how fantastic. I mean, there's the picture right there. He looks absolutely overjoyed in that picture. It's hard for him to replicate that the following year. It's hard for anybody to replicate that. The Islanders, they have a really poor regular season by their standards. Again, by their standards. However, being down 3-1 against the Capitals, that's not a problem. They win 3 straight, including the infamous, or famous, depending on which side of the ledger you're on, the LaFontaine goal in the Easter game. So, Easter Sunday, I believe it was the Easter Sunday game, right? Pretty long game, and we'll talk about that again. But the Islanders won it, and that was the first time that I, as a hockey fan, watched an overtime game that I was that invested in, and then my heart just sunk. I mentioned how crazy the trading was for Phil Esposito, right? He trades a first-round draft pick to the Quebec Nordiques for their coach, Michel Bergeron. Yeah. The Nordiques, in the midst of doing this, decide, hey, let's just trade Dale Hunter, and we're going to trade our coach, too, while we're at it. Now, oddly enough, in the trade with Hunter, the draft pick they get back ends up becoming Joe Sakic. So it works from that perspective. However, Quebec's kind of starting to fall apart. And Michel Bergeron being traded to the Rangers is weird. But it's not the weirdest thing that happened that year. Nope. Toronto, they're terrible during the regular season, but in round 1, this time against St. Louis, the previous season was Chicago, they win. So if you're a Toronto fan during this era, you're confused. Your team is hot garbage during the regular season. Can't win anything. But in the postseason, they're really good. And when they get eliminated in the second round, it's in 7 games. So when you look at it, you have kind of a team that's both bad and good at the same time. Wendell Clark's becoming a folk hero in Toronto for his playoff performances and for his heart. But during the regular season, fans are losing their minds at how bad they are. So they're tied with the North Stars in points, but in the tiebreaker, they knock the North Stars out of the playoffs, and they end up knocking St. Louis out in the first round before losing to Detroit in the second round. And that was a pretty awesome series. Remember that one well. That Toronto-Detroit series was crazy. That 32 years later, I'm going, yeah, that was fun to watch. Vancouver, what the hell? They signed Pat Quinn to a contract for the future while he's still coaching the LA Kings. I don't think you can do that. And it's just so bizarre. I remember this playing itself out. And I remember being like, what? Because at this point, I am disillusioned as a Canucks fan. I've been watching for almost a decade. And I'm starting to think this team is always going to be crap. And then I see them signing a guy out of LA. One of the few teams that was worse than the Canucks was the Kings at that point. And I'm like, wait, they're bringing in the Kings. They signed him. They're fined $310,000 by the National Hockey League for being stupid and signing a guy to a contract while he's coaching another team. I can't make this up. And the Canucks, God bless them, they won 6 road games that year. I think that was with Tom Watt as coach. I don't remember. At this point, I'm just railing against the Canucks, and people wonder why I, at age 15 at that point, would have been watching other teams as well. I couldn't handle this. This was terrible. And the way that Pat Quinn came in was so weird. And then they bring in Bob McCammon to coach as well. And of course, McCammon will have a decent little run out of this. But at this point, the Canucks it's Keystone Cops. It's what the hell? You sign a guy to a contract while he's coaching a team you're playing against. A division rival. Like, just imagine Rogie Vachon, who's, GM in LA and known for being a bit temperamental. Just imagine how he took that news. By the way, your coach, he's signed to become general manager of the Canucks next year. Huh? Okay. It's the most bizarre, absolutely weirdest thing. Period. Washington, seriously, he's in your... Okay, all right, moving along. Washington, so they don't have Bent Gustafson that year, and I know Bent had the other, Bent Ake Gustafson. When he was over here, he just went with Bent. He dropped the other. Just Bent Gustafson. Every book I've got calls him Bent Gustafson. Bent Gustafson would return after a year away, which the Capitals go, cool, because they finished the season 16-5-2 down the stretch. Amazing run down the stretch. The Hockey News picks them to go to the finals in their playoff preview, and then the Islanders knock them out for the 4th time in 5 years. Capitals fans must have hated the Islanders. Yep. I remember watching that game, and that was the longest game since 1943. And I remember trying to stay hydrated, being absolutely fascinated with that game. I watched it on a tiny little TV in a bedroom, and I was riveted to the whole thing while I think my dad got bored at one point, and he's like, this is never going to end. I seem to remember my mother at some point like, well, are you still watching this? Yeah, I want to see who wins. And I wanted the Caps to win because I was still scared that the Islanders, with LaFontaine and Flatley and now Kelly Rudy and net, I was scared the Islanders were going to get back to dynasty status. I was scared they were rearming. And in the annual for 88, they even say they're rearming for Dynasty 2. It's right in there. It's in the headline. In fact, I'll look that up. I'll grab that so you guys can see I'm not just making that up. People are like, oh, we're probably making all that up. No. Nope. Patient Isles build towards Dynasty 2. Right there. So the idea was the Islanders are building everything back up. They've still got Bossy and Trottier and Potvin and these guys, but they're building their way back up. And playoff victories like that added to that narrative. Fun note to end on is Winnipeg. So again, this is all in alphabetical. Bandit Berthiaume, Pokey Reddick, both rookie goaltenders. Winnipeg says, yep, we'll do that. Rookie goaltenders. John Ferguson, at this point, probably really frustrated with the whole process. He goes with 2 rookie goaltenders, and you know what? It works. Now, during the summer, they admit, okay, if the goalies falter because they're rookies, they're kids, we've got to have a backup plan. I don't really have much of a backup plan. We know that the Jets aren't going to have long-term success. However, it was a really great story. Goals against dropped by 101 during that season. So again, much like here, where it's even bigger for Detroit, 101 less goals against for Winnipeg in a year. So the Jets, pretty solid run, and Pokey and the Bandit, that's what they were called. Don't shoot the messenger. Pokey and the Bandit. Eldon, Pokey Reddick, and Daniel Bandit Berthiaume. And Bandit would kind of bounce around the league, so would Pokey Reddick after that. But for that 1 year, they were the Kings of Winnipeg. They beat the Flames in round 1, and then in round 2 against the Oilers, they get swept. And again, General Manager John Ferguson does not expect that they will be able to be on the same level as Edmonton, but he does want them to get better, and he does feel like they can threaten Calgary. So he's trying to make moves to get up into Calgary's range, which in the playoffs they were better than Calgary that year, but during the regular season they were behind them, so he wants to make up that difference. And there you go. The 86-87 season, which was crazy, and, punctuated by Hextall's slash out of nowhere on Kent Nilsson. And it's not like Kent Nilsson is a guy who ran goalies or played a really abrasive game. To me, it just, and I showed you guys twice, it looked to me like he was just there. So the Oilers are running away with it, and he's just there. Sorry, you were within my reach. I'm going to kill you with my stick. I'm going to see if your leg comes off. And that's just how Hextall played, and that's how crazy the year was. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.